Hello.
근데 거기다 어려. 나도 괜히 떨고. 내가 이거
So shall I start?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Shall I start, sir?
Yeah, I'm ready. I'm ready. Yeah.
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 Okay, sir. I'll start it. I'll give the introduction. Good afternoon, respected doctors. I'm Dr. Rajneesh Dedia from Medical Affairs of MQ Pharmaceutical. I welcome all of you for the today's scientific meeting. Dear doctors, we are at the MCure are on the mission to nurture and support 28 days of the ovarian cycle, the programming 28, which is the foundation of ART. MCure promises to deliver all possible support in terms of therapeutic agents and academic support for the programming 28. So, dear doctors, we have been locked down since last 3 weeks to fight against Corona pandemic. So, we thought to take your valuable time to be utilized for scientific activities. So, today we have with us expert Dr. Sujay Das Gupta. So, to introduce Dr. Sujay Das Gupta, I'll say the Dr. Sujay Das Gupta is the doctor with a golden medical curriculum, as he pursued 4 gold medals in MBBS curriculum. He is also gold medalist in MS obstetric and gynecologist, which he pursued from Kolkata Medical College, and subsequently he completed DNB. Sir is a member of Royal College of Obstetrician and Gynecologist, London. He pursued training in ultrasounds, endoscopy, infertility across various parts of India. Sir has completed trainings on advanced ARTs from National University of Hospital, Singapore. Sir is also member of various societies like BOGS, FOXY. Sir is faculty and convener of the MRCOG course, Kolkata. Sir has 15 publications in national and international journals. He is part of the peer review PMJ case reports, and sir is the winner of the Professor Geoffrey Chamberlain Awards RCGO World Congress held in the 2019 at London. Sir has delivered more than 15 lectures at the 50 conference at national and international levels. He is member of the Male on Fertility. Then his area of the interests are PCOS, male infertility, and recurrent pregnancy loss. And he is consultant IV specialist practicing in Genoma Fertility Center, Kolkata. So without further delay, I would request sir to take over the session and give his expert talk on the topic male factors in infertility. So over to you, sir. May I request you to share the slides and take over the session?
Thank you for your kind introduction. Okay, just let me share the slides. Okay. So, good afternoon, everybody. Now, today I'm not going to discuss in very details about male infertility. I'll rather try to focus on the problems, common day-to-day problems we often face in our day-to-day practice in male infertility. The problem is that, you know, the male infertility solely accounts for, male factor solely accounts for 30% cases of infertility, and in another 15 to 20% they are contributory factors. That is, male factors may be responsible in around 40 to 50% cases of infertility. I think everybody can hear me.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. Very comfortable.
Okay. So there is a concern that there is global decline in male fertility. The male sperm counts are decreasing, At the same time, there are other concerns like some disorder, we call it testicular dysgenesis disorder, which consists of some congenital anomalies like hypospadias, undescended testes, as well as testicular cancer like testicular germ cell tumors and azoospermia. All of these are constitute the spectrum of disease called testicular dysgenesis syndrome. There is a concern that this is also increasing, maybe because of some environmental factors. Now, if you see the WHO cutoff of different semen analysis cutoff, you see in 1980 the normal definition of sperm count was 20 to 200. It was more than 20 till 1999, but in 2010 it was reduced to more than 50. As a result, you can see almost all the parameters, the cutoff value of all the parameters are declining. But we don't know whether it's actually representing the global decline in male infertility, or it's because of we are having more sophisticated data, or we are doing research in more sophisticated way so that we are able to reduce the cutoff. Now, the WHO reporting, you know, the WHO standards of 2010, but all of you are busy practitioners in the clinic, so it's often difficult to see each and every point in semen analysis. In fact, each and every point, you should not see each and every point. Just like we when we see the urine analysis report, we see certain points. Similarly, in case of semen analysis, we have to concentrate on few points. Number one is the sperm concentration. See the sperm concentration, that should be more than 15 million per ml. If it is okay, then fine. Then see the total motility, which should be more than 40%, and the progressive motility more than 32%. Please remember the previous division of progressive motility into rapidly progressive and slowly progressive has been withdrawn. So there should be only mention of total motility and progressive motility. And then see the morphology, that should be more than 4%. If these three parameters are okay, concentration, motility, and morphology, you can essentially ignore all other parameters. But if these three are not okay, then you have to look for other things. Number 4 is vitality. You have to look for vitality when the motility is low, because you have to differentiate between immotile sperms and the dead sperms. So you have to see whether the immotile sperms are actually living or not. And last but not the least, in extreme cases, when there is severe oligospermia less than 5 million per ml, or there is azoospermia, in that case, you have to look into volume and the pH, that is the reaction. Why? See, sometimes the laboratory report will mention about fructose. If the fructose is positive, that means, because you know fructose is secreted from the seminal vesicle. So if the fructose is positive, you know that it's there is no obstruction. On the other hand, if the fructose is negative, so you can assume that there is ejaculatory tract obstruction. That's why seminal vesicle secretion is not coming. But unfortunately, most of the laboratories will not mention fructose in their semen analysis report. Even then, you can differentiate between the obstructive and non-obstructive cause by simply seeing these two parameters, volume and pH. How? Remember, semen volume, 60% of the semen volume is contributed by the seminal vesicle. So if there is obstruction, the volume will be low. Next point, pH. Remember, the prostatic fluid is acidic and the seminal vesicle fluid is alkaline. So if there is obstruction, the pH will be low, pH will be acidic. So as a result, if there is obstructive pathology, the pH and the volume will be low. On the other hand, if there is no obstruction, pH and volume should be normal. So these are the main 6 points on which you should concentrate while interpreting the semen analysis results. Now, in 2000, as you see, as a result, because the cutoff has declined, so some of the men who were previously classified as infertile may be reclassified as fertile according to new, relatively new guideline. But we don't know what does it mean, what's the implication, whether it actually means we can reduce the unnecessary treatment, or it actually means that we are actually not treating some men. The exact interpretation is not known. Remember, WHO semen analysis was done on 1,941 men living in America, Europe, and Australia. All these men fathered the baby within 1 year of unprotected intercourse. And the cutoff is not basically the reference point. Cutoff means 5th centile. That is, if you are arranging these men, the parameters of these men in the ascending orders, the men whose parameters will be below the 5th men will be classified as something called abnormal. So remember, even the men whose semen, the sperm concentration was 5 million per ml, even that man was able to become father within 1 year of unprotected intercourse. So these values indicate the indication of you need to intervene, you need to investigate, but that does not mean that the man is infertile. So the semen analysis correctly identify the fertility rather than infertility. And please remember, the semen is notorious for day-to-day variation, because unlike urine, which is tightly regulated in kidney, semen production and its constituents are poorly regulated in the male genital tract. The question is from which laboratory you should do the test. Remember, even in the USA, it has been found that majority of the labs, they are not following the WHO standard. Even we conducted our study, it was published in 2019 in Fertility Reproduction, and we found that less than 5% of the labs of the West Bengal, among the labs which we could study, around more than 200 labs, less than 5% of the labs are following the WHO protocol. You see this laboratory parameter. See, they have mentioned that the total sperm count should be less than more than 20 million per ml, which is not true. It should be more than 15 million per ml. Even then, if you assume that it's 20 million per ml, so the count is 23. It should be normal, but they have mentioned oligospermia. So how funny. This is very common scenario we see in semen analysis reports. So beware of the laboratory from where you are doing the semen analysis report. Ideal semen analysis report should look like this. It should include all the important parameters so that at a glance you have idea about whether you should intervene or you should reassure the man that no, everything is okay. Now, it's a very common problem. Majority of the men face some problem and embarrassment in semen collection, particularly if they are doing it for the first time in the laboratory. So we should provide adequate privacy, relaxation, and the ideal is a bedroom where there is a facility to bring the partner. Toilet is the worst site for collection of semen. So ideally the semen should be collected in a private room with washing facilities. Even then, there are some men who face difficulty in semen collection. So first, please ask whether they are comfortable with semen collection or not, because we sometimes encounter the men who are not used to masturbation. So you should ask the men in sensitive way. The next problem is that ask the men, what's the problem? Have you tried semen collection? Okay, I've tried, but I could not. Why? What's the problem? The most common problem is the erection failure at the time of collection. You can give sildenafil, tadalafil, or vardenafil. The sildenafil and tadalafil should be given at least 1 hour before collection because they are relatively slow acting. On the other hand, vardenafil, they'll act within 15 to 20 minutes, so it's relatively quick acting. If even after adequate erection, so you have to ask whether at what point he is facing the problem. If after adequate erection he is not having ejaculation, then only you can apply vibroejaculator. You see, it's a small device. It's easily available in most of the laboratories where the man can apply it on the glans penis, but it should be applied on the erect penis. So firstly, there should be erection. Only after that vibroejaculation can be applied. Next is for the men who are not used to masturbation, they can collect the semen by coitus interruptus. So that's why you should give some private room. It's better to collect the semen during coitus interruptus by non-toxic condom because some men may have spillage during collection, and again the vaginal cell may contaminate the semen. So it's better to use non-toxic condom during coitus interruptus, although non-toxic condoms are a little bit costlier. If all these fail, repeated attempt in the laboratory to collect the semen fail, then you can advise home collection. But remember, in that case, the man has to reach the laboratory within 1 hour of collection, or 30 minutes to 1 hour. And if he is carrying the semen, he should carry the semen in body temperature, in close contact with body, preferably in the pocket of the trousers. And if he is coming by AC car, the AC of the car should be stopped. If all these fail, you should advise retrograde, you should suspect retrograde ejaculation. So urine, post masturbation urine should be collected. In that case, advise the man to masturbate and collect the urine only after when he feels orgasm. Otherwise, urine will not contain the sperm, so you will have false diagnosis. Even if all these fail, you have access to prostatic massage or electroejaculation. Unfortunately, electroejaculation is not very easily available in most of the centers, even in Kolkata. because it requires general anesthesia and it requires electric stimulation of the prostate, and there is small risk of rectal burn injury. So if all these fail and you think that this couple requires IVF, in only that case there is last resort, that is testicular sperm aspiration, but this is the last resort. It should be for the couples who are requiring IVF for other indications. And in these cases, please consider freezing of the semen, because in the next time when the man will require to give the semen, he will feel confident that, okay, even if I don't give the semen today, my previous sample is frozen, so it will give the confidence. So please freeze the semen in those cases where there is difficulty in semen collection. Now, this is one important, interesting case study. This couple came to us after 1 year of marriage with inability to conceive. On further inquiry, the men admitted that they did not have consummation of marriage because of severe erectile dysfunction, and he tried semen collection many times but could not. And on further inquiry, he admitted that he could not ejaculate during intercourse and not during masturbation. And the penile doctor revealed there is arteriogenic impotence, that is, there is problem in the blood flow in the penis. And this is the trans-rectal ultrasound result showing the congenital anomaly, that is problem in development of the seminal vesicles. That's why the problem has arisen. So we offered them in two options. Either you can go for TESA, ICSI, or you can go for IUI using donor sperm. But unfortunately, this couple was lost to follow. Now, we'll review some semen analysis reports and discuss the management of these cases. So you see this semen analysis report, almost everything is normal, like sperm count, motility, although the rapid and slow progressive should not be mentioned, but assume that these are normal. Let's see the pus cell. Pus cell count is high. So this is pyospermia. What would you do? Would you like to give empirical antibiotic? No, because empirical antibiotic is not useful, and even in some studies it has been found to be harmful. But you should ask some questions. Ask the method of collection. If the method is by contact interrupters without using condom, the vaginal cells may contaminate the semen, so you can get plenty of pus cells. Next time, whenever you will ask the men to collect the semen, ask proper hand washing. Most of the laboratories, unfortunately, don't do the discriminatory test. Ideally, the laboratory should do the test called peroxidase test to discriminate between round cell and pus cell. All the round cell in semen are not pus cell. Round cell may be of three types. Number one, pus cell, that is neutrophil, which may be associated with infection or may not. Number two is epithelial cells shed from the male genital tract. And number three are the immature sperm cells like spermatogonia. So you have to identify whether they are actually round cells or pus cells. Ask history whether there is any history suggestive of infection like pain, abnormal discharge, or swelling. Culture of the semen is recommended. In some cases, you can send the patient to urologist for prostatic massage and culture. Remember, the guideline, this is guideline as per European Urology Association. They are suggesting that the significance of leukocytes in semen is controversial. It does not necessarily mean there is infection, although leukocytes are more likely in men who are suffering from prostatitis and urethritis. Remember, all this constitutes a spectrum of the disease called MAGI, male accessory gland infection, which include prostatitis and urethritis. Both of these are associated with reduced fertility, but if you treat the infection with antibiotic, you can eradicate the infection, but that does not mean that you can eradicate the inflammation. Just think about PID, pelvic inflammatory disease. If you give antibiotic, you can eradicate the infection, but the post-infection inflammatory changes, the obstructive changes may be there, and you cannot reverse them with antibiotics. The same happens in the male genital tract. And although antibiotics can improve the semen parameters, antibiotics are not associated with increased pregnancy rate. Having said that, in culture, if you find chlamydia and gonorrhea, please remember chlamydia needs special culture because in routine culture, chlamydia may not be detected. If you detect chlamydia and gonorrhea, please aggressively treat both the partners. Otherwise, these are going to give rise to PID, pelvic inflammatory disease in the female partner. So, no role of routine antibiotics. Now, this is interesting case. This couple was suffering from unexplained infertility. Repeatedly, there was pus cell in the semen. culture negative, so you send the patient to urologist for prostatic massage. At that time, the man revealed that he is feeling pain during intercourse, and on examination, there are severe phimosis, and the pus cell disappeared after the circumcision operation, and this couple conceived spontaneously. So there may be some cases where the pus cell may not be because of actual infection. Now we are coming to the next case scenario, next semen analysis reports. Please remember, all of these are actual case scenario, actual patient data which are anonymized, and I'm presenting this with the consent from the patient. Now this semen analysis report, see, sperm concentration is low, less than 12, but total motility is absolutely fine, 42%, more than 40% is enough. Although progressive motility is less than 32%, that is less than normal, 17%. But if total motility is normal, you can ignore it. Normal morphology 4%, which is normal. Don't go by the reference values mentioned by the laboratories. Go by the reference values mentioned by WHO only. So here there is only problem is oligospermia, or more correctly, it should be termed as oligozoospermia. We can call it mild male factor. But what is mild male factor? The definitions are not. We did not find any definition in literature review. Some bodies define the sperm concentration more than 5 million per ml as the mild male factor, but majority of the studies concentrated on other term called total motile sperm count. Please remember, sperm concentration and sperm count are technically not the same thing, although we use them interchangeably. Sperm concentration is million per ml, that is the concentration of the sperm in per ml. And whereas the sperm count means the number of sperm in the ejaculate volume, that is, it should be expressed in million per ejaculate. So the total motile sperm count is the multiplication of total the total motility of the sperm into the sperm concentration into the semen volume. The unit is not million per ml, unit is million per ejaculate or million itself. Some studies define mild male factor where the total motile sperm count is more than 5. Some studies define as the TMMC more than 10, or some define TMMC more than 20. But the recent ESHRE guidelines stick to the definition of total motile sperm count more than 10 million per ejaculate as mild male factor infertility. This is the paper which is suggesting that TMMC, total motile sperm count, may be better indicator of fertility status than sperm concentration and total motility individually, and majority of the ART labs are usually giving the results expressing total motile sperm count as well. Now, what to do into mild male factor? Investigations are not usually needed because in mild male factor may represent some day-to-day variation of semen parameters. So usually they are not associated with some obstructive or non-obstructive pathology. So investigations are not usually required. Now there are some options. You can give antioxidants, you can give clomiphene, or you can use other adjuvants. Now regarding medical treatment, the guidelines suggested that only place of medical treatment is hypogonadotropic hypogonadism, that is hypo, where you can give gonadotropin for 3 to 6 months and it's associated with dramatic results. Guidelines are not suggesting empirical use of clomiphene or antioxidants, although we all are practicing this, we all are prescribing this in our day-to-day practice. Having said that, lifestyle changes make sense, like you have to ask the men to avoid heat exposure to scrotum, like avoiding tight undergarment, avoiding prolonged sitting, prolonged driving, keeping the laptop on the lap, or keeping the mobile phone in the pocket of the trousers. Obesity is a risk factor, you know, the fast food, junk food, and many foods are containing estrogenized products, so they should be avoided. Smoking, alcohol are well known for their deleterious effects. Anabolic steroids, you know, they can suppress the sperm production. And one important thing we should not ignore, that is chronic scrotal fungal dermatitis, because they are associated with scrotal inflammation and they'll raise the scrotal temperature, and it's a reversible cause of male infertility. If you treat it with antifungal, the sperm count may improve. Regarding oxidative stress, you know, in each cell there is tug of war between the free radicals and the antioxidants. And free radicals are basically the molecules which are having one unpaired electron in their outer orbit. So they are unstable molecules. They try to stabilize themselves by donating their extra electron, by which they'll create some chain reaction, then they create free radical. So there are number of antioxidants. You can see almost every pharma company is having their antioxidants, and almost every company is claiming that their one is the best, but there is no absolute evidence to suggest that one type of antioxidant is better than another. So I will advise to write down the antioxidant of that pharma company with which you are having good relationship. Otherwise, there is no absolute scientific evidence to suggest one antioxidant over another. Having said that, these two important trials published recently, FAZET trial and the MOXIE trial, they did not find any beneficial role of antioxidants, which led the editors of Fertility Sterility to write an article to suggest whether we should avoid using antioxidants or not. Having said that, one systematic review published last year found that antioxidants may be beneficial. On the other hand, this is the Cochrane review published in 2019. They found that antioxidants may improve the sperm quality and live birth rate and clinical pregnancy rate, although the quality of evidence is low, so we need further study. There is no evidence that antioxidants are associated with increased risk of miscarriage, but they may increase the risk of gastrointestinal side effects in the men. However, the evidences are inconclusive. So what we do, we usually advise the men, okay, you can start an antioxidant, but please remember, semen analysis may improve spontaneously. So even after giving antioxidant, yes, semen analysis improve. That does not mean that it's because of using antioxidant. Maybe without antioxidant, semen analysis, semen parameters may improve. But remember, sometimes even after giving semen, the antioxidant, the semen parameters may decline. We have seen that the man has taken antioxidant for 3 months, 6 months, and after 3 to 6 months, the semen parameter was even worse than initial report. So what's the explanation? It's not because of antioxidant. Antioxidant did not work. The deterioration is because of the natural history, because these men who are having low sperm count, particularly severe oligospermia, they have tendency to have lower sperm count day by day, and sometimes they can land up in azoospermia. So we have to make the man alert about this condition. Now, in this condition, where the semen analysis was 12 million per ml initial sperm concentration, and you have given antioxidants, when you should repeat it. If there is mild male factor, you should repeat after 3 months, because you know the spermatogenesis takes 74 days of time. But if this is a case of severe oligospermia or azoospermia, in that case, you should not defer it, because in that case, you have to intervene early. So in that case, repeat it as soon as possible. So this is the original case where after giving antioxidant, after 3 months, the semen parameters were absolutely normal. It's non-azoospermia. Having said that, we cannot claim it's because of antioxidants. So we cannot give any credit or discredit to antioxidants, although you all are advising antioxidant in our day-to-day practice. Now, next case. See, sperm concentration 8 million per ml, total motility low, progressive motility low, normal morphology low, total motile sperm count is also low. So it's a combination of oligo, actinoteratozoospermia, OAT, which is the most common semen abnormality seen in male factor infertility. So what will you do? IUI or ICSI? Before taking decision, please remember, we are not treating the semen analysis alone. So we have to take care of other factors, tubal factors, ovarian reserve, duration of infertility. And most important is the age of the female partner, because all the ART techniques, IUI, IVF, ICSI, in all cases, the main determinant of success is the age. So age is the most important factor. It is said that if the total motile sperm count is 10 to 20, IUI is associated with very good success rate. If it is 5 to 10, success rate is slightly low. But if it is less than 5, we ideally should not do IUI. So ideal TMSC should be 5 to 10 million per ml. But if it is less than 5 million, what you should do? Suppose this man, the total motile sperm count we have seen is 4.8 million. It's less than 5. So ideally, we should offer ICSI. But there are many couples who don't want to do ICSI right now because of financial or other reasons. So can you do IUI? Yes, you can do IUI. Counseling the partner that we are going to do something called trial IUI. That is, we'll do IUI and we'll see the post-wash sperm count. If the post-wash sperm parameter is okay, we can go for further 3 to 4 cycle IUI. If the post-wash condition is not okay, then we will be doing IUI this cycle because we have already prepared the cement. But from next cycle, we will not do IUI because it's associated with reduced success rate. So you should better go for ICSI, or otherwise we can do IUI using donor sperm. So if the post-wash sperm count, that is inseminating sperm motile sperm count, is less than 5 million and morphology less than 4%, in that case there is no use of doing further IUI. So if there is no tubal factor, post-wash sperm count, inseminating motile sperm count is more than 1 million per ml, you can do further IUI 3 to 4 cycles if this particular cycle of IUI fails. If it is less than 1 million per ml, see the morphology. If morphology more than 4%, you can do further IUI. However, if the morphology is also less than 4%, you should not do IUI, you should offer ICSI, or you can do IUI using donor sperm. Remember, in that case, you can ask the men to try to give sample twice, because it has been found that although some men may feel difficult to give the sample 2 times, it has been found that the second ejaculate often contains the better quality of sperms. So in this case, double ejaculate should be offered, and you should alert the man before IUI so that he can be mentally prepared for giving the sample 2 times on the same day. So in a nutshell, in oligospermia IUI, if the total motile sperm count is 5 to 10 million per million, you can do IUI 4 to 6 cycles. If it is less than 5 million, counsel before IUI, you can double ejaculate and see the post-wash inseminating motile sperm count. If it is more than 1 million, you can do further IUI. If it is less than 1, see the morphology. If the morphology is good, you can do IUI. If the morphology is not good, there is no use of further IUI. You should go for ICSI. And this is the important paper published in the ESHRE journal, Human Reproduction 2018. It has clarified many confusion about IUI. I request you to go through this paper. It's very easy to treat and it's very pleasant to read rather. Now see, suppose you are doing IUI in this couple, the tubal patency has not been tested. So would you go for tubal patency test before IUI or not? It has been found that as the severity of male factors increases, the chance of tubal factor infertility decreases. Why? We don't know, we don't have explanation. Therefore, if you find that the woman is having high risk factor for tubal blockage like PID, dysmenorrhea, endometriosis, previous pelvic operation, in that case, you should offer tubal testing before IUI. Otherwise, you can go for IUI 3 cycles. If that fails, then only go for HSG or other tubal patency test. So tubal patency test is not always essential before doing IUI in low risk women. Now see, this is the man who received antioxidants. He is having uncontrolled diabetes. Remember, sometimes the reason for male factor infertility may be simply uncontrolled diabetes. Even the men, they don't know that they are having diabetes. So if after investigation we find diabetes, and often we see that after proper diabetic control, the sperm parameters may become absolutely normal. It's common practice to offer transscrotal ultrasound in male factor infertility. We'll discuss later on when to offer these types of transscrotal ultrasound. See, there was large epididymal cyst. In fact, in infertile population, there is increased prevalence of epididymal cyst. We send the patient to urologist, and this is the epididymal cyst found in clinical examination. This man was advised surgery for epididymal cyst because he was having pain and swelling and discomfort. In this case, they planned for IUI, but fortunately they conceived naturally. How? We don't know. The question is whether epididymal cyst, if you find in scrotal ultrasound, which is also called spermatozoil, whether they need surgery or not. Epididymal cysts, although they are found in more number in infertile population, they are not associated with infertility. Rather, surgical removal of epididymal cysts can cause scarring and further obstruction. So only indication of epididymal cyst removal in infertile male is where there is pain or discomfort, or there is rapid increase in the size of the cyst. Otherwise, it does not need surgery. Now the next case. Sperm concentration 1.2. Total motility 30%, motile sperm count 0.4, morphology 1%. So it's a case of severe male factor. So here we have to see the volume and the pH. See, the volume and the pH are normal. So probably we are dealing with some non-obstructive pathology. So it's a case of severe oligoasthenoteratozoospermia. Remember, Many severe male factor is not always the indication of donor sperm. We have a tendency to offer the donor sperm, but please don't do it. It's the severe violation of the patient autonomy, because patient has the right to choose their treatment option. So our duty is to offer them the options, what are the options they are having, and they are the people who have to decide whether they should go for IUI donor or ICSI. And in fact, in this case, it was found that HSG showing bilateral tube block, AMH is low, age factor was there, and they have been trying for pregnancy for 5 years. So there is no use of doing IUI. Rather, you should offer ICSI. Question is, in severe male factor, whether you should give antioxidant or not. You can give antioxidant, but you should not rely on antioxidant and say the man that, okay, everything will be okay after the 3 months after taking the antioxidant. Please remember, this paper has cited that in 1/4 of the male with severe male factor infertility, if you don't do any active intervention, within 6 months to 1 year of time, 1/4 of them will land up in azoospermia. In moderate male factor, the chance is 33% only. However, in mild male factor, there is no chance of developing azoospermia. So in mild male factor, you can give antioxidant and wait for 3 months. In severe male factor, you can give antioxidant. As such, there is no harm, but you should not rely solely on the antioxidant. So therefore, the treatment should not be delayed. Antioxidant can be given, but should not delay the treatment. Consider freezing. If the man wants to go for ICSI, but he cannot afford it because of financial problem, offer freezing, because otherwise at the time when they'll decide for ICSI, you may see that that semen analysis will be showing azoospermia. It's important to investigate the cause, and the treatment of choice here is ICSI. In extreme cases, sometimes you may not find very good quality of sperm in the ejaculate at the time of ICSI. So there are some studies which are suggesting that testicular sperm is having less amount of DNA damage and they are containing better quality of sperm than the ejaculated sperm, although this is controversial topic because KESA is invasive technique. However, sometimes if you don't find very good quality of sperm in the ejaculate, you can offer KESA in this man even when there is no azoospermia. Why you should investigate when the sperm count is less than 5 million per ml? Because there is good chance there may be associated genetic problem or obstruction. So we should start with history taking. The lifestyle changes, what we have mentioned, should not be underestimated. And you should ask about the occupation, the smoking, prolonged sitting, driving, alcohol, etc. Diabetes, mumps. Please remember, if the man has post-pubertal mumps, that is if the mumps developed after 14 to 15 years of age and there was orchitis, then there is chance that it may account for oligospermia. Sometimes the man may not give the history of mumps, the swelling of the cheeks, because sometimes mumps may cause orchitis even without the parotid involvement. So you have to ask for it, and cancer treatment, you know, is obviously risk factor. Surgical history, hernia operation, particularly in the infancy, when the hernia of congenital inguinal hernia is operated, because in very early infancy, it's sometimes difficult to identify the vas during surgery. So there is chance of vas injury during surgery. So the man in adult age may land up in azoospermia. Orchidopexy history should be taken, and pituitary surgery, because sometimes we see the man who recently we have seen a man who had pituitary surgery and landed up in azoospermia, and on examination, further investigation, he was having hypogonadotrophic hypogonadism, and we have referred the man to endocrinologist for starting the gonadotrophin replacement therapy. Drugs. You know the effects of cytotoxic chemotherapy and steroids, but don't forget the effect of sulfasalazine. Sometimes men are taking for rheumatoid arthritis or ankylosing spondylitis. We have seen the men having this oligospermia because of sulfasalazine, and then we requested the rheumatologist to change it, and after changing it, the sperm count improved dramatically. And sexual history, low libido and erectile dysfunction, they may indicate some hypogonadal function, that is testosterone deficiency. Now, why history is important? See, this man gave the history of bilateral undescended testes. Later on, he said that he had 2 abdominal operations. So these are, see, scrotum is empty and there are 2 scars. Actually, he gave the history that one operation in right side was done at 21 years of age, when the surgeons were able to drag down the right testis in the scrotum, but unfortunately it underwent atrophy later on. Left testis, they tried orchidopexy on the left side, but unfortunately they did not find the testicle. We have advised MRI, but that MRI also did not locate the testicle, any testicle. So probably the left testicle was not there and right testicle was there. It was dragged down, but subsequently it underwent atrophy. So it's the importance of taking history, that like history of orchidopexy. Next, physical examination. You should ask about HC, the general physical habitus. Unfortunately, gynecologists often feel embarrassed in examining the male patients, but this should be done for their well-being. You should see the testicular size and consistency. In obstructive pathology, usually the testicle size are normal and the consistency is firm. In non-obstructive pathology, when there is testicular failure, testicular size may be small and the testicles may feel soft. Sometimes they may feel hard. But remember, this is not always true. Even men with hypogonadotropic hypogonadism or frank testicular failure, they may have normal size testicles. But remember, why? At the same time, you should look for varicocele. I'll discuss later on why varicocele should be looked clinically, because the diagnosis of varicocele is always clinical. You should not advise ultrasound only for diagnosis of varicocele. And remember why this physical examination is important, because physical examination may reveal some life-threatening causes. See. Sorry. Sperm quality reduction, that is reduced sperm count, may be the early indication of testicular tumor. This is the man who requested for AID, IUI donor sperm. On examination, there was testicular swelling, and subsequently, after referral to oncologist, he was found to have testicular malignant teratoma, which was operated, and he received chemotherapy. On the contrary, it has been found that men who are having sperm parameter abnormality, particularly severe male factor infertility, they can develop testicular cancer in later life. So, physical examination is important in this case. Even in this case, you should not leave after physical examination, particularly in some men who are at high risk of testicular cancer. You should advise them how to do self-testicular examination. It's available on the internet. It's just like self-breast examination. It's the awareness, self-awareness to reduce the risk of testicular cancer and early diagnosis. Particularly, it should be done when the testicles are atrophic, when there is history of orchidopexy or there is undescended testicle, and when there is testicular microcalcification. That is, sometimes in ultrasound you can find that there is calcium deposition inside the testicle. This is a risk factor for testicular cancer, particularly in the men who are aged between 30 to 40 years of age. So self-testicular examination is important. Remember, we as a doctor, we should take the holistic approach. We are not treating the semen count as a whole. We should not do any harm to the patient after all. This is the example. This man having secondary azoospermia. So this man have a baby girl who is aged 6 years. 5 years ago, he had mumps orchitis. After that, he now landed up in azoospermia. So a man is having a baby previously, that does not mean that he cannot have male factor infertility. So even in secondary infertility, you should check up for male factor problems and semen analysis. And this man, we found that the left testicle was atrophic, and we advised ultrasound. On ultrasound, it confirmed the left testicular size was small and there was microcalcification. So we advised the men how to do self-testicular examination. Now, what investigation you should do? If you are suspecting non-obstructive pathology from clinical examination and the semen report like pH and semen molecule, you should advise hormonal investigation like FSH, LH, testosterone, and blood sugar. Blood sugar is very much important. Going to go for scrotal ultrasound. If there is some abnormal findings, if you suspect varicocele, epididymal cyst, or testicular swelling, in some men they are having tight cremaster, a very strong cremasteric reflex there, that is having very tight scrotum. You cannot feel the testicles and other structures inside the scrotum because of the very tight skin. And in those cases who are having post mumps orchitis, because in that case you should see whether in post mumps, that man who had previous mumps orchitis, whether there is microcalcification or not, it should do it. But for diagnosis of varicocele, you should not do ultrasound. You can do ultrasound for confirmation of varicocele. Why, I'll be discussing later on. Transrectal ultrasound should be advised when there is obstructive pathology, particularly when you suspect congenital bilateral absence of vas deferens, because you cannot clinically feel the vas. In that case, you should advise transrectal ultrasound to see the prostate gland, vas, and the seminal vesicles in better way. Genetic testing, karyotyping, and Y chromosome microdeletion both should be done when there is suspected testicular failure. And when there is, remember, Y chromosome microdeletion around 8 to 10,000 rupees. So that's why we usually offer karyotyping first. If karyotyping is abnormal, there is no use of going for Y chromosome microdeletion. You can go for Y chromosome microdeletion only when the karyotyping is normal and the man wants to go for invasive procedures like TESA, ICSI only in those cases. And remember, cystic fibrosis, although it's more prevalent in the Caucasian, it can happen in our population as well. We don't have the exact data. So if on clinical examination, you cannot find the bilateral vas difference, that is called congenital bilateral absence of vas difference, you should go for CFTR testing, congenital, that is cystic fibrosis transmembrane receptor testing. So in severe cases of oligozoospermia, asthenokeratozoospermia or azoospermia, you see whether there is obstructive pathology or non-obstructive pathology. If there is non-obstructive pathology, that is testicular volume is low and the volume and semen pH of the semen are normal, go for FSH, LH, testosterone and blood sugar. Prolactin and thyroid are not required in each and every case. It should be advised when you suspect some sexual dysfunction, low libido, etc. There may be three scenarios. Number one, FSH is high. FSH high means sperm production is hampered. LH and testosterone may be normal. How? Remember, in testes there are two compartments. One is spermatogenesis compartment, which is seminiferous tubule. Another is endocrine compartment, which is the Leydig cell. So if only the seminiferous tubule is affected, FSH will be high. Leydig cell function will be normal. So you have normal LH and normal testosterone. On the other hand, if there is global testicular failure, that is both the seminiferous tubules as well as the Leydig cells are hampered, in that case, you will find testosterone low and LH high. So FSH will be high in all cases, but LH and testosterone may vary. In this case, you should offer karyotyping and Y chromosome microdeletion testing. On the other hand, low FSH, low LH, and low testosterone means hypo. You should advise pituitary imaging. Conversely, you can get sometimes FSH, LH low and testosterone high. How? The man is taking anabolic steroids. So in that case, you should take proper drug history. On the other hand, if you find that volume and the pH of the semen is low, and if you are fortunate enough, the report will show that fructose is negative, you should go for some imaging because you should suspect some obstructive pathology. If there is congenital bilateral absence of vas difference, CFTR testing should be done. Now, in this case, where the total sperm concentration was 1.2 million per ml, as I've shown, FSH slightly raised, LH slightly raised, and testosterone also. Would you give testosterone? There is a temptation, with due respect, particularly among the urologists, to prescribe testosterone. Please don't do it. Testosterone will do more harm than good, because when you give testosterone, testosterone should be given only in men who are not concerned about fertility, who are suffering from sexual dysfunction and are having low testosterone level. Otherwise, if you give testosterone from outside, this testosterone will not cross the blood-testis barrier, so will not reach the seminiferous tubules. Rather, they will provide feedback inhibition on pituitary gland, so they will stop LH and FSH secretion. As a result, the intratesticular testosterone production will be hampered, so the sperm production may become from bad to worse. So please don't advise testosterone even when testosterone is low. What you can do? You can test for estradiol. Yes, in men you can test for estradiol. Remember, normal range for estradiol in men is 10 to 40 picogram per ml. If the testosterone estradiol ratio is less than 10, that is, testosterone should be measured. Please remember the units here, because some labs will be giving the units in nanomole per ml. So convert it into testosterone. For testosterone, the ideal unit for ratio calculation is nanogram per dl, and for estradiol it should be pg per ml. If it is less than 10, then give aromatase inhibitors like anastrozole or letrozole for 3 to 4 months. And there are plenty of evidences, and this meta-analysis is suggesting that the letrozole for 3 to 6 months will improve the sperm parameters like sperm concentration, motility, and morphology significantly. Now, this is the real case. Why it is important for physical examination? See, this man, as I've shown you, 1.2 million, there was low testosterone level. His brother is also having the same problem. On physical examination, he found this. That is, the left testicle was undescended. So we sent the patient to the urologist for consideration of orchidopexy. Orchidopexy will not improve the sperm count, but it's important. so that he can do self-testicular examination so that the testicular cancer can be identified by the earliest age. This man opted for IUI donor because they could not go for ICSI. Unfortunately, they were lost to follow-up. Now, this is the case. This man is having C. azoospermia, and see the volume and the pH both are low. So probably we are dealing with some obstructive pathology, obstructive azoospermia. But please remember, whenever you find that the volume is low, always don't remember that it's representing the true semen parameters. We have to ask few questions. Ask for the abstinence. If the abstinence is inadequate, suppose the man has ejaculated yesterday, so the volume will be low. So you should repeat the test. Ask the completeness of the collection. Sometimes there may be spillage during semen collection. So as a result, the volume will be low. Ask the man, is this the usual amount of ejaculate you are having or other times? Because man will usually be able to answer this question. Exclude retrograde ejaculation. How? We have already discussed about asking about post-masturbation urine. If you are suspecting obstructive pathology, you should go for transrectal ultrasound. Surgical retrieval is usually the surgical retrieval is usually done. Although there are surgical reconstruction, some cases it may be possible, like vas anastomosis, vas epididymis anastomosis, or the ejaculated duct obstruction removal, but they require expertise. Very few urologists are doing it, and even after doing it, there is no guarantee that reobstruction cannot happen. So majority of the time, advising the surgical sperm retrieval is better, although it may require repeated attempts. However, in obstructive pathology, the chance of sperm retrieval is better than non-obstructive pathology. There are various options, TESA and TC, but we gynecologists are more comfortable with, in doing TESA, testicular sperm aspiration, or TC, rather than doing epididymal aspiration and epididymal extraction. Now, this man, bilateral vas was not palpable clinically. Sometimes you may feel difficult in palpating the vas. I'll suggest start from the testicle, go by the posterior aspect of epididymis. You see vas is a very thin rope-like structure, cord-like structure rather, and is slippery in nature. If you cannot find it, advise TRUS. In this man, see the transrectal ultrasound. You cannot locate the vas and the seminal vesicle. So there is congenital absence of bilateral vas and seminal vesicle. So we advise CFTR testing, but we advise the CFTR testing only after doing trial TESA. That is when after we have done testicular sperm aspiration and after we have found the sperm. Why? It's because of financial reason. See, the CFTR testing, it will cost around 25 to 30,000 rupees. And often, even after that, you may not get all the mutations detected because ordinary CFTR testing will detect 90% of the mutations, cystic fibrosis mutation. Even then, that test is negative, there is 10% mutation. And see, if the man is carrier of cystic fibrosis mutation, you have to ask testing of the female partner. So it will cost around 50 to 60,000 rupees. What's the use of it if you cannot find sperm in the testicle? So that's why we have done testicular sperm aspiration. We have found the sperm, we have frozen the sperm, and then we advise the CFTR testing in this man. This is the actual report of this man. I am showing you after taking his permission. This is how the cystic fibrosis mutation reporting look like. It should report no copy number variant. That is, cystic fibrosis mutation was not there. So it's reassuring. You should not test the female partner. You can go for ICSI. If there is report a positive report, it will mention that copy number variant CNV of cystic fibrosis is there. Now this is another case. You see, this is azoospermia again. Volume and the pH are normal, so you are dealing with non-obstructive azoospermia. Now in non-obstructive azoospermia, physical examination to detect the testicular size and the FSH to detect the prognosis and find out the cause are important. But can you deny testicular sperm aspiration only because of the fact that FSH is high and testicular sperm is size is low? No. Even in Klinefelter syndrome, if the man wants, you can go for TESA, because sometimes even in micro-TC, although it's not commonly done everywhere, microtesticular sperm extraction, with microtissus, sometimes even men with Klinefelter syndrome, you can find isolated foci of spermatogenesis inside the testicle. And it has been found that neither testicular size nor FSH can correctly predict the chance of sperm retrieval. In men with small testicle and high FSH, you can get the sperm. On the other hand, men with normal FSH and normal testicular size, you cannot find the sperm. So that's why ideally you should go for TESA, trial TESA, that is you should go for testicular sperm aspiration before you offer actual ICSI. And remember, only negative factor where you should not do TESA is where there is Y chromosome microdeletion. There are various types of Y chromosome microdeletion. We call AZF, azoospermia factor A, B, C, D. Although C and D are common, if there is C and D are deleted, you can do TESA. But if there is azoospermia factor A and B are deleted, ideally you should not do TESA because there is almost 0% chance that you will get any sperm here. And again, there is chance that this condition may be transmitted from father to the male baby. Remember, in this case, sometimes we see the men are referred for FNAC. Please don't refer the men for FNAC because in FNAC you can get only get the report whether sperms are available or not, but you cannot see whether the sperms are motile or not. Motility of the sperm is required for further procedures. Before, if the sperms are motile, you can go for ICSI directly. If the sperms are not motile, you have to see whether these sperms are actually sleeping or not. So FNAC cannot give this answer, and moreover in FNAC you cannot freeze the sperm. So that's why don't do FNAC, rather send for trial TESA this men. Now we'll see 3 case examples of obstructive pathology, non-obstructive pathology, 3 interesting cases. See, this is the man. You see the karyotyping report. What you see, one extra copy of X chromosome. That is the karyotyping is 47XSY. So this is the Klinefelter syndrome. What we know, the Klinefelter syndrome, the men are having abnormal height. That is, they are longer than other individual. Unfortunately, this is not the case in all the cases. See the height of this man having gynecomastia, small testes, micropenis, and the height is small. And there is decreased secondary sex character. You cannot see any hair growth in the body. So always don't suspect that the height is normal, so he cannot be having Klinefelter. It cannot happen all the ways. This report, see the karyotyping is absolutely normal. However, the Y chromosome microdeletion report. This is how a Y chromosome microdeletion report looks like. If they are saying detected, that means the gene is detected, so it's reassuring. If it is saying not detected, that means the gene is deleted. In that case, you should counsel the man. See, there is AZF-A is detected, so you can go for TESA, but unfortunately AZF-B is not detected. So AZF-B microdeletion is there. And so in this case, you should not ideally go for TESA. But this is the real case scenario. This man is he is a professor is a lecturer in one engineering college, and he said that under any circumstance I will not go for donor sperm. I'll try to give till the end. So please do ICSI TESA from my testicle. We have repeatedly counseled. We have now, fortunately, because of lockdown, we have given him some time to reconsider his decision. But if the man is still insisting on TESA in this case, this is really a ethical dilemma. This is another case we have recently done. I'm sorry for the poor quality picture. Here actually there is translocation between 14 and 21 chromosome. Although X chromosome, sex chromosomes are normal. So there is translocation between 14 and 21 chromosomes. So there is increased chance of Down syndrome in the baby. But this man, he belonged to very orthodox family. So he refused to use donor sperm. Even his wife also did not agree to have donor sperm. So they wanted to do TESA. We have done TESA. We have done trial TESA. But we have, after doing the trial TESA, we have sent the sperm for doing FISH, that is fluorescent in situ hybridization, for FISH testing to look for aneuploidy, because it can happen that translocation may be limited to the somatic cell. Translocation may not be affecting his spermatogonial cells, and it happened that we found that all the sperms were normal for the FISH, for 21, 14, and all other chromosomes. So we have done the aneuploidy testing and we have done the ICSI. This woman conceived, but unfortunately she miscarried. And this is the normal Y chromosome microdeletion report. In this man who is having chromosomal translocation, see the report looking absolutely normal. All the genes are detected. So there is no microdeletion. So even if there is genetic defect, you can go for sperm aneuploidy testing, sperm fish testing. If there is no sperm aneuploidy detected, nothing needs to be done. If sperm aneuploidy is detected, you can even go for ICSI, but at the same time, you should ideally do something called PGT, pre-implantation genetic testing. This is called PGT-SR, pre-implantation genetic testing for structural rearrangement. Previously, we used to call it PGD. Remember, PGD, we don't use the term PGD or PGS no longer. We use the term rather PGT-SR, PGT-A, or PGT-M nowadays. Now, this is another case. See, sperm concentration is normal, but not a single sperm is motile. You should look for vitality in this case. So, this vitality is 32%. So, sperms are vital but non-motile. This is called necrozoospermia, although necrozoospermia is not the correct term because necro means all the sperms are dead. Although the necrozoospermia term is used, ideal term should be total astenospermia. So, what should you do? Ask for abstinence. If the man is abstinent for 10 days, 20 days, there may be this condition. Ask about frequency of collection. Ask whether the man collected the sperm at home and reached the laboratory after 4 to 5 hours. It may happen that man has given semen at 10 a.m. and the laboratory is testing the semen at 2 p.m. Look for vitality by various tests. It can be associated with smoking, varicocele, and one genetic disorder called Cartagena syndrome or immotile genetic cilia syndrome. So you should ask for respiratory tract infection. If there is repeated respiratory tract infection, this may lead to such feature. Antioxidant you can give, but you should not wait. Repeat the test after proper abstinence. After abstinence for 2 to 3 days. ICSI can be done using ejaculated sperm, but sometimes it is said that testicular sperm is better in this case. So TESA can be done for ICSI in this case. This is the army man whose repeated sample shows total astenospermia. He used to smoke, but he stopped smoking. Even 1 year after stop smoking, the scenario persisted. Ultrasound of scrotum showing left-sided varicocele. The urologist advised the surgery, but we advised against surgery. Why I am saying later on. We tried ICSI with ejaculated sperm. The sperms were of very poor quality. This man advocated for TESA. We have done TESA ICSI and conceived and is now carrying the pregnancy. Remember, varicocele, subclinical varicocele is when you diagnose the varicocele ultrasonologically, you cannot diagnose the varicocele clinically. This is called subclinical, when you cannot clinically diagnose. On the other hand, clinical varicocele is of 3 grades. Grade 1, which is palpable at Valsalva maneuver. Grade 2, palpable at rest. And number 3, which is visible from the distal place, even without palpation. Remember, the indication of surgery for varicocele is only when there is palpable varicocele, that is when there is clinical varicocele. When that is ultrasound detected varicocele, subclinical varicocele should not be operated. So that's why you should not detect varicocele by ultrasound. Number 2, there should be abnormal sperm parameter, and there is good chance that the the couple can conceive naturally. That is, there should not be any female factor. Number 3, there is discrepancy in the testicular size. That is the size on which side the varicocele is there, the testicle is smaller than the other side. So these 4 criteria should be fulfilled. Number 1, clinical varicocele. Number 2, sperm parameters abnormal. Number 3, no female factor. And number 4 is that discrepancy in testicular size. If all these parameters are fulfilled, then only you should refer the man for surgery for varicocele, otherwise not. This is the last case of semen analysis report. See, all the parameters are normal except the morphology is slightly low. This is isolated teratozoospermia. You should not do anything because isolated teratozoospermia significance is not known and it's not the indication for IUI or ICSI. Now see, we have seen number of semen analysis reports. But there are some men who are facing ejaculatory difficulties, and they should also be treated under the broad heading of male factor infertility. This is the man who had been married for 5 years. He is diabetic. He is diabetic on medication for 8 years. Previously, he was able to masturbate and he was able to ejaculate during masturbation. But for last 6 years he is not able to ejaculate even during masturbation, and during intercourse he cannot ejaculate. Physical examination unremarkable, so there is total ejaculation failure. Vibro ejaculator we have tried, but it failed. Post masturbation urine we have tried, it also failed. So there was no retrograde ejaculation. So it was absolute difficulty in ejaculation. We call it an ejaculation. This is the transrectal ultrasound report. Please remember, even without physical obstruction, without organic obstruction, when there is diabetic neuropathy, there may be some obstructive changes in the seminal vesicle. This is what happened in this case. We have done TSIC and the man conceived. So remember, when you face ejaculatory problem, please remember these are the common causes. Diabetic is the very common cause. Number 2 is spinal cord injury, neurological disorder, some obstruction in the ejaculatory tract. And remember, we sometimes give SSRI for premature ejaculation. It can, on the other hand, as a side effect, give rise to an ejaculation. Sildenafil and tadalafil, particularly when taken for erectile dysfunction, if taken for long time, some men may complain for ejaculatory dysfunction. And sometimes we have seen some men who are taking Ayurvedic medicine or homeopathic medicine for ejaculatory for premature ejaculation. We have seen these men who are having previously, they used to have premature ejaculation. So they have consulted some Ayurvedic doctors and taken the Ayurvedic medication. But after taking them, they landed up in total ejaculation failure. And remember, alpha blocker for prostate problem can also give rise to same situation. And also always exclude the retrograde ejaculation by excluding diabetes, neurological disorder, and obstruction. You can consider changing the medicine. If you suspect retrograde ejaculation, alpha blocker can be changed by consultation with urologist. Medical therapy can be tried, but results are frustrating. Vibro ejaculator can help in some cases of retrograde ejaculation where the nerve pathways, autonomic nerve pathways are intact. Otherwise, it will not help. In majority of the cases, you have to collect the semen by alkalizing the urine, because you know that the semen is, the urine is acidic. So the acidic pH will kill the sperm. So before urine collection, you have to give systemic alkalinizer, potassium bicarbonate. And on the day of collection, you ask the man to void to empty the bladder. Then with the catheter, simple rubber catheter, you should inject 200 to 300 ml of sodium bicarbonate in the bladder. But please remember, in this case, you cannot use any type of lubricant or local anesthetic because they are likely to damage the sperms. But you cannot, at the same time, you cannot insert that catheter inside the male urethra, which is around 24 centimeter long. So you should dip the catheter in the sperm wash media, take it from the laboratory, and then insert inside the bladder and inject around 200 to 300 ml of sodium bicarbonate. After that, ask the man to masturbate, and when he feels orgasm, ask the man to evacuate the bladder. After he has evacuated the bladder, again reinsert the catheter and collect all the residual urine and see the sperm concentration in the lab. If the sperm concentration is good, you should go for IUI. But unfortunately, majority of the cases, the sperm concentration is very low, so you have no option other than going for ICSI. And if this fails, you always have the option of TESA, that is testicular sperm aspiration. And these are the common drugs used in retrograde ejaculation, but majority of the time drug therapy is not working properly. But in delayed ejaculation, or in the men who are feeling the ejaculation problem only during intercourse, but they are not having problem in masturbation, in that case, we have seen in our experience the cabergoline works in very wonderful manner, even when the prolactin level is low. So you can give in this man cabergoline like 0.5 milligram twice a week. So that's all. I think we have discussed lots of the things. So in a nutshell, semen analysis should be done from the authentic labs who are following the WHO 2010 standards. Single abnormal test does not have any value. It should be repeated. Antioxidants can be tried in mild male factor infertility. In severe cases, you can give antioxidant, but should not defer the treatment and should not rely only on the antioxidant. And please remember, donor sperm is not the only solution for male factor infertility. Thank you very much for your patient hearing.
Thank you, sir, for your excellent talk. Now for this talk, around 40 audience were there. We are watching this presentation. So I'm requesting for the audience that if you have any query regarding this topic, you can put your queries in the chat box. So the
Dr. Rajneesh, there
doctor
is
is
a
asking
query.
the role of DFI. Sorry?
There is a
Hello?
query, role of DFI in severe
Yes,
OAT.
the doctor is asking the role of DFI in severe OAT.
Okay, that is the I think the sperm defragmentation index, right?
Okay.
DFI you said, right?
Yes,
DFI,
yes,
yes.
DFI, role
Okay.
of DFI, sir,
Okay.
yes.
This sperm DNA fragmentation test is an established test in case of recurrent miscarriage. You see the in ESHRE guideline 2017, they said that in recurrent miscarriage, even when in couple with recurrent miscarriage, even when the sperm parameters are normal, you can go for the sperm DNA fragmentation. Although there is no definitive definitive treatment for improving the DFI, but it should be done because it will give the explanation for recurrent pregnancy loss. On the other hand, DFI is not associated with fertility in all the cases, particularly fertility in vivo, because men with higher concentration of sperm DNA fragmentation, they can conceive naturally. On the other, sperm with normal, very low concentration of DNA fragmentation, they cannot conceive. Again, there are problems in laboratory testing. We know that there are two types of testing: comet test and tunnel test. Laboratory testing are not standardized, and moreover, in severe OAT, we are using. Hello.
Yes, sir. Yes.
In severe OAT, often we are doing ICSI. Now we are not doing ordinary IVF in most of the cases. When you are doing ICSI, DFI will not alter your treatment decision. So just for the diagnostic purpose, DFI testing is not justified in most of the cases of severe OAT.
Okay, so thank you for sir resolving this query. I think there are no further queries, so I'll hand over the session to our divisional head, Mr. Rajiv Agarwal, for the vote of thanks. So Rajiv sir, please.
Yeah. Very good evening, everybody. I am Rajiv Agarwal, Division Head, IVA, Division of Emcure Pharmaceuticals, pioneer in gynec and IVF. On behalf of Emcure Pharmaceuticals Limited, I thank Dr. Sujay Das Gupta for an elaborative and wonderful session. And we are very privileged and honored for Dr. And I am also thankful to all the doctors who have attended this webinar. And we are also very thankful to persons associated directly and indirectly with this webinar to make it very successful. We are going with a difficult time of COVID. So let us pray that we'll come out very soon from this. Till the time, we wish you stay in healthy life. Thank you very much. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, sir. It was very elaborative and very informative talk.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thanks, sir, very much. You have covered in a time like all the aspects of male infertility.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you so much. I hope people did not feel bored.
No. You made it so interesting because there were case studies. It made them more interactive and more interesting.
Thank you. Thank you so much.
Okay. Good day,
Thank
sir.
you very much, sir.
Okay. That's it. Thank you.
Yes, sir.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you, sir.